Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. So amazing to see such an enthusiastic audience.
Yes, the seats filled up in just 2 days. And welcome, everyone, live here in Otaniemi, as well as online. We want to send a special greetings to the Aalto-University Mikkeli campus, where we have another 60 people gathered for the live stream of the third Aalto Founder Talk.
We'll be your hosts. My name is Tomi Tanneröholm. I'm a quantum and space tech student, and I started my entrepreneurial journey at aalto-ES after my first exam week in 2023.
And I'm Karla Still. I study sustainable entrepreneurship, and I'm also passionate about effective altruism, which is an evidence-based way of doing good. Today, we are thrilled to host Miki Kuusi. Miki started at Aalto Business School in 2009. Soon, he also joined and started leading Aalto Entrepreneurship Society, and later Slush, where he was the CEO between 2011 and 2014. In 2014, at the age of 25, he also founded Wolt, together with his 5 co-founders.
With Miki in the lead, Wolt reached unicorn status in only 7 years. In 2022, DoorDash acquired Wolt at a valuation of $7 billion. This year, DoorDash also acquired its British competitor, Deliveroo, where Miki will soon become the CEO of, and Marianne Vikkula will be stepping up as the head of Wolt.
So, before he moves to London, we are very excited to invite up on stage the head of international at DoorDash and soon to be CEO of Deliveroo, Miki Kuusi.
Welcome, Miki. So, you started your entrepreneurial journey only 300 meters in that direction in a building called Startup Sauna. There's a rumor that said that you were so excited about building that the only way to get you out of the building was to disconnect you from the Wi-Fi. Is there any truth in that?
It's not far away from the truth. I think back then, Aalto University was still very much in the making, and there wasn't too much of an infrastructure outside of the School of Technology in Otaniemi, and Kalevi Ekman had started Design Factory, and I think that was the unique place in time, and I was very lucky in the sense that I ended up there by happenstance in my first week of studies, and I basically never left. So that was the first few years of my studies.
I see. In addition to the Entrepreneurship Society in Aalto, Slush has been very important for how your career has gone. And Slush 2025 is here just in 5 days. And many volunteers are probably present here at this talk today. Tell me about the volunteer action during the time that you were leading Slush, which left you with a wow.
Yeah, I mean, Slush for me was the way I think about entrepreneurship is that, it's ultimately about answering questions that usually come from curiosity. You're like, why is this like this? Or why hasn't someone done something like that? And I think entrepreneurship is the action of, doing something about it. And Slush for me was answering the question, why couldn't you have this kind of like a Silicon Valley type ecosystem for building companies out of Europe, building tech companies out of Europe. And that's kind of what we set out to build. And, Slush actually never we were students ourselves and we didn't get paid. So we were kind of volunteers. And why Slush has so many volunteers is that, we kind of ended up building Slush, as kind of volunteers ourselves. And obviously, in the 4 years that I led it, we went from being basically, 5 or 6 or 7 students and then inviting some maybe 20, 30 more people for the event itself to becoming a more professionally led organization and with over 1,000 volunteers. The way we ended up actually first time with over 1,000 volunteers was that we decided that we wanted to have a lot of students come to Slush. And we were we are selling these tickets and they're very expensive, so we can't just let students come for free. So we figured that if we invite students to come as volunteers and to work, we can get them in for free. That was the original idea. And then we spoke with Jukka Kujala, who was the first head of volunteers at Slush, that 1,000 sounds like a cool number. So can you design an organization for 1,000 students and figure out what they do? And in 2013, which was the first year, I remember us having this almost like auction that we have like 150 volunteers and we don't know what to do with them. And we tried to come up with something like useful for them to do. But the whole point was that like we always saw that one of the purposes of Slush was to give young people the opportunity to get kind of like to see, this kind of like company building and hear these kind of like stories of how people have built something from scratch, oftentimes with very little experience and at a young age.
So what would you say to the first-time Slush volunteers who are here today? How can they make the most out of their experience?
It's a good question. Like,
you have one example.
Yeah, I always, like people, when people talk about Slush, you usually talk about, who are speaking there and like all the things that are happening on the agenda and so forth. And the funny thing about it is that you can go to YouTube and you will have an endless amount of content that you can watch. So for me, Slush has always been more about the people that come to Slush. One of the coolest things you can do as a volunteer is be like a Slush buddy, as an example. Get to know people. And learn from people, not just like people that are like investors or entrepreneurs or so forth, but also like other volunteers. Like I guess many people here today are university students. Like university is one of the most special times of the human experience if you end up going in university, because you have usually smart and motivated people that gather into a location for a period of time, and you have a lot of time on your hands. And you're in a similar circumstance with all the people around you. And you will find that later in life that is very rare. And that's why university is such a special time in many ways, like as a starting point for things that can come out of it. And I think Slush is something similar. It's a very special time for those couple of days and what can come out of it. So go in with an open mind, talk with a lot of people, and like I think good things can come out of it.
Thank you. Miki, everyone? In the next 35 minutes, we will dive into topics such as growing as a leader in a fast-growing company, social impact, and the future of technology. After that, you, the audience, will have the opportunity to ask your own questions. Let's get started.
So let's start with scaling together with the company. For context, prior to this event, I called Marianne Vikkula and I asked her, what do I need to understand in order to understand you, Miki? And
I'm curious to hear what she said.
Well, to paraphrase her answer, she said, you feel like the same person as in the Slush days when you guys met, but there's huge differences. So the most impressive thing that she found about you is that you scale incredibly fast, not just the company, but yourself with the company. And you apparently learn at such an incredible rate, and other people have also mentioned along the same lines that there are 3 unique people in the startup ecosystem, and you happen to be one of those people, where you throw yourself at the problem, and then you ask for help, and somehow things just happen out of that. So I'm kind of looking for a framework. After hearing what others have said about you, first, I'll ask if you recognize this sort of unique touch you have to throwing yourself at the problem.
Whoa, psychoanalysis on yourself. I don't know. Like the way I've thought about it is that the most important thing you can have, and this is the only thing that you have when you have no experience and when you're young, is enthusiasm. Another way to say attitude. Like attitude takes you very far away in life. What I decided very early on is that I don't want to do things that I'm not excited about, that I'm not enthusiastic about. And conversely, if I spend time on something, if I do something, I will decide to become enthusiastic about it. My grandfather allegedly said at some point, I've heard this from my mother, that a lot of people ask themselves, what do I love? What do I love to do? What am I good at doing? What should I do? And you're kind of like going from one thing to the other, trying to figure out this thing that you like, this thing that you should be doing. And he said that people get it all wrong. People like things that they're good at, and people are good at things that they do a lot of. And to do a lot of something, you first need to start. So just start doing something, stick to it, become good at it, and it's very highly likely that you will become passionate about it and you will love it. And I think that's kind of the framework that I have when it comes to life. Like life is too short to just do something, just have a job, just do something from 9 to 5. And enthusiasm is funny in the sense that it's contagious. So if you're enthusiastic, it tends to move to people around you. And that's how you also like grow as a leader, and that's how you create culture. A lot of things start from enthusiasm, and enthusiasm, tends to start with, just actively deciding to have a certain type of an attitude about something. We don't oftentimes get to choose what happens to us in life. There's so many things that happen to us in life that we don't get to choose. Like we don't get to choose that, there's a macroeconomic depression right now. We don't get to choose that Russia attacked Ukraine. We don't get to choose like so many of the things that happen to us. We might apply, to a university. We don't get to choose all the other people that apply and how well they do versus us, whether we get in or whether we don't get in. The only thing we get to really choose is what do we do about the things that happen to us? So what do we do next? What is our attitude about it? And if your attitude about it is forward-looking, like, let's make the best out of it. I don't know if this is, a good thing or a bad thing, but like, hey, let's give it a shot. And then you stick to it and you become enthusiastic about it. That tends to lead to good places. And that's basically what's happened to me. And the other thing is that you need to have this kind of a beginner's mindset. I think the moment you decide that now I am successful, or now I know how it is done, or I've become an expert, like that's the moment you start to lose. Because the reality is that the world is moving so quickly, things are changing so quickly that like the only way to succeed is to have this constant mindset that I really don't know that much. And I still have mostly more to learn than I know today. And when you have this kind of a beginner's mindset, this kind of student mindset, that tends to take you very far away in life. I got very lucky. I learned a lot during the years that I was in Aalto-yliopisto and in Aalto-University, learning by doing. I learned that actually organizing events is a fantastic way to learn how to do things. I organized a lot of events when I was studying, and also when I was supposed to be studying. And Slush, of course, ended up being some of the last events I organized. I was an early employee at Supercell completely by happenstance. And of course, now people are like, he was at Supercell. Supercell was not a thing back then. Like when I joined Supercell, I had friends come to me like, Miki, you are an idiot. Why are you going to work for a gaming company doing like Facebook games? And I'm like, we're not doing Facebook games anymore, we're pivoting to mobile. Like, oh my God, that sounds stupid. The thing is that things sound so like sensible in hindsight. But back then it was just some startup in gaming industry, which was not really a thing, doing social games or mobile that were not really a thing. And the point is that like, you connect the dots afterwards. But I learned so much because Ilkka and Mikko and the team at Supercell, this was not their first company, this was their second company. And you learn a lot from people that are doing their second company, because they made so many mistakes in company number one that they want to get right in company number two. So if I think about my scaling, in a way, when I got to Wolt, I had this learning experience of being CEO of Slush. I had this learning experience of observing Ilkka and the team from very close. So I already had like an unfair advantage. I think that helped. If I didn't have that, would I be still like 11 years later, like, doing the things that I do in the roles that I do? Probably not. But that would be fine as well. Like life is an adventure.
Incredible. So I want to figure out how you're going to start employing the framework into the next stage. So the other people weren't able to really describe how you actually do it. So now I have to ask you, now that you're going to Deliveroo the next 6 months, what are you prioritizing to learn and who are you asking for help?
Yeah, you need to start from a place of humility as a starting point. Like all companies, every group of people has a culture. Like, if you have 5 friends come together, you have culture between the 5 people, how they act. And, if you think about, your 5 closest friends, how easy would it be to change the culture of how the 5 of you, act with each other? Who's the person who comes up with the ideas? Who's the person who tells all the stupid jokes? Who's the person that's always, asking difficult questions and being a little bit like, challenging the others? And imagine how difficult it is to change the culture of 5 people. And now imagine like Deliveroo is a company of 3,500 people. So for me, the first thing is, having this kind of beginner's mindset that I know a lot about our industry, but I don't know about the markets Deliveroo operates in. I have a lot of thoughts about like how to build a company in our scale, but I don't know this company in specific. Like, I've worked with a lot of people in different roles doing the same things that, I'm now meeting people in the new context doing those things, but, they're not the same people. So kind of the starting assumption is that you have to start from a place of humility. I think humility goes very far away in life. overall, because humility is ultimately, the acceptance of the fact that you have more to learn than what you know. The other thing is that I think, whenever you do most things in life, they are team sports. There are actually very few individual sports in life. Even if you're competing in an individual sport, the reality is that you have a team behind you. We just don't see those people in TV. We see the athlete, but we don't see the team. And you don't succeed together, you succeed with a team. And you need to spend time, cultivating and building those teams. And if you join an existing team, you need to earn your keep. You need to earn your trust. You need to, show that you are a reliable person and you have something to bring to the table. So I think there's a lot of these things that just start from humility and learning, and not assuming things, but rather having hypotheses, but going in with an open mindset. But at the same time, our industry is a very fast-moving industry, so I don't have the luxury of let's start to do stuff next year. We are in an industry where bias for action is very important. Our business is a business of hours, not even in a business of days or weeks. And that means that you lose if you are too slow. So that's the other part of it. How do you balance? And in life and in business, most things tend to come down to these balances. You're finding, the right balance between things. And, for me, leadership is a lot about fine-tuning that balance. Balance between growth and profitability. Balance between, doing things well and moving as fast as you can. Balance between, building something deep, but at the same time expanding and going broad. How do you, be ambitious, but you're focused at the same time? And as a leader, you're adjusting that balance, and it's not going to be the same every day and every year. And that's the thing that you need to constantly do. And usually, you're going too fast or you're going too slow. You're never going at the right pace. There's a famous F1 driver that said that if everything seems to be under control, you're simply not going fast enough. That's something I think about quite often. So going in with humility doesn't mean that you're going to be shy to take action and you're going to be shy to make necessary changes when you see them. It's just that you shouldn't assume you know the right answers without learning more.
So how do you take those actions, or how do you make that decision if you have now a couple hours to decide a meaningful thing in Deliveroo? What could the process look like?
Yeah, I think for me it's simple. The first thing you need to do is build the team. That's the first thing. Whatever you do, the first thing should be that what do I need in terms of having the right team to succeed, and do I have the right team? And how do I get to having the right team, the right people in the spots? I don't know if you guys have seen, now these are old movies, Ocean's 11 or Ocean's 12, and I think there's probably Ocean's 25 by now, but these movies where George Clooney is like a master criminal who needs to do a heist, steal a diamond from somewhere, and then he builds the team, the best thief in the world, and he travels to a country and he gets the best lockpick on earth that happens to be French, and builds this team. And that's what I have in my mind when I think about team building. It's almost that what are the roles and what are the best people in the roles, and how do I get the best people to do those roles for the team. So it all starts by having the right people doing in the right roles in the right team. Then the second thing is that you need to make sure that everyone has the same alignment on what does success look like. If we're successful, what is going to happen? I'm a big believer in offsites. Ever since I was in aalto-yliopisto organizing events, we would go for a weekend somewhere, get people together, and ultimately, it was about aligning ourselves on what does success look like. You're a lot more likely to be successful if you know what successful looks like and everyone agrees on it. And then, ultimately, you work together with the team and you divvy up the work, and then you have catch-up points of are we getting there? What is working? What is not working? How do we solve these issues? If someone has issues getting there, how do we support them?
Thank you. Final question on learning and decision making. As a lot of learning comes through failure, and shedding light on these difficult moments are part of the mission at the Aalto Founder Talks. We want to show students that making mistakes is part of every founder's journey. What is a decision you made where you felt really bad afterwards? One example.
I've made a lot of mistakes. I think the key thing about the mistakes I've had the honor of making is that none of them have been lethal to the company or to myself, although some have been close to both. So I think the key thing about mistakes is that you don't let mistakes become too big, which means if you are making an important decision, you rather try to get as much data to inform you that this is the right decision you're making. And data might be talking with customers. It might be, asking for advice. That's an example of getting data. It might be looking at actual data if you have a business that's generating data, but as a startup, you oftentimes don't have that. You have intuition and you have, qualitative data points. So I think, when you're making a big decision, especially if it's a one-way door decision, you only go through once and you can't come back. You need to be very careful about making the right decision. So rather have a more thorough decision-making process. If it's a decision which is a two-way door, easily reversible, it's actually more important to make the decision quickly and then to reverse the decision also quickly.
So
the other thing is, if you're making a decision that leads to a bad place, make a new decision when it looks like this is not the right thing anymore quickly enough so that it doesn't become cataclysmically bad. Sorry.
Is there an example where it has become cataclysmically bad?
Slush 2013, we almost went bankrupt because we scaled too aggressively in hindsight. Like what happened with that one was that Slush 2012 was a 3,000 person event. It was the biggest event in the history of the cable factory. We couldn't come up with a bigger event venue for a number of reasons for the next year, yet we wanted to continue to grow. And the next year's event was 7,000 people. And they told us we were crazy. We're going to organize the biggest event ever in the space where we already did half the size of the event that was like too small. And how we scaled the venue was that we did all this. We booked 3 ships in the backyard and we built all these massive tent structures and so forth, and they were incredibly expensive. And the end result was that we very nearly went bankrupt that year with Slush. And that's an example of something where it was like a series of bad decisions. It actually came from ego. Like ego tends to lead to bad decisions. So we kind of wanted to prove to ourselves and everyone else that we can do it, and we wanted to organize a bigger thing than the previous year. And in hindsight, it almost killed us. Yeah, it was a good example of something where when we couldn't change the initial decisions anymore, I remember thinking to myself, realizing what were the mistakes that I made and why I made them. Usually you make bad decisions because of ego.
Yeah.
Ego meaning that I just want to do it.
And then moving to the second theme of this talk, like we promised in the beginning, we'll talk about social impact that startups have on society. When preparing for this talk, I knew that I also wanted to ask something about Wolt's careers. And in the book Wolt in Tarina, the story of Wolt, which came out in September this year, there was a section that caught my attention. So a freely translated quote starts, "Kuusi had a vision in the early years of Wolt, which eventually turned out to be naive. He thought that just like we have music, games, and entertainment in App Store, people could download apps offering work, which they could then freely choose the job suitable for them. However, this idea didn't in practice without problems fit the labor market, which had operated with a different logic for decades." Quote ends. So this dream has partly come true, but especially for people relying on Wolt as their only source of income, it's not that perfect yet. I want to know, what is the biggest difference between your dreams back in 2015 and the current state of platform economy in Europe?
Regulation is still the same as it was 11 years ago.
Yeah. You had expected it to change?
Yes. That's the biggest disappointment I have. I've become very disappointed in our ability to evolve societies overall, driven by technology. And I think that's something that you see in the tech industry constantly. When you look at what are we doing about AI? What are we doing about democracy, social media platforms? Ultimately, the way I think about the time that we live in is that we're living through kind of like an industrial revolution, where first phase of it was that we had electronics become increasingly part of everything. Like I have electronics in my finger with the Oura Ring. Then the second part of it, this electronics is going online. So that's the software era. And then the third one is that this online electronics is becoming smarter, and that's the latest phase, which is AI. And when you go through this kind of an industrial revolution, basically the world was not designed for the world with all the capabilities that we have today coming from technology. And what needs to happen in an optimal world is that you work on having regulation that regulates the downsides, but enables the upsides of technology. I've been incredibly disappointed how slow this has been, and how much resistance there is from this kind of world that already existed before the current industrial revolution to actually enable things that happen next. Wolt Courier side is a perfect example. We started with a very naive idea. We were why can I download a game on the App Store and spend money on it? To have basically pay for the time that I'm spending in the game, but I can't download an app that gets basically I do something and I get paid for it. It kind of felt like obviously this is going to happen. And that's actually, if you think about like the courier work, it's a very simple like thing that we do. Any one of you can go to the App Store, download Wolt Partner. It's the courier application that we have. You sign up using our information. You say, I want to work in this city and this country. And then there's certain things we need to know about you, like do you have a working permit in the country you're wanting to operate in? If you want to use deliver with a car, do you have a driver's license and so forth? Then you get put to a queue, and we free up people from a queue to become a courier in a city. And then once you become enabled to be a courier in a city, you can put the app on at any point. You can accept and decline tasks. We always show you that, hey, there's a pickup from here to here. This is how much we pay for it. Do you want to do it? Yes, no. It's very simple. Like when you look at all the conversation around it, it sounds like this overly complicated thing, but it's actually a very simple thing. This work, what it's good for, like we have around 350,000 active couriers currently using the Wolt platform. What this work is good for, it's really good for getting a side income as a student or as a full-time worker or being between jobs and so forth. And this is how most people do it. Like the average Wolt courier does around 8.5 hours of deliveries per week. And this kind of work, it doesn't exist in the traditional labor market. There's not this kind of work that exists. Like if I look at then, what are the ways that this work can then mean, we see that in different countries and different cities, this work ends up used in a very different manner. Like in Finland, this is a Nordic thing, actually not a Finnish thing, with a lot of immigrants working as Wolt couriers. Funnily enough, globally, less than 1/3 of our couriers are immigrants. That's a Nordic phenomenon. It actually talks more about the Nordic labor market than it talks about Wolt. The other one is that like we have a minority of people who do this full time. This is not the best full-time job in the world, because to make the work as flexible as it is, which is how most people want to do it, and frankly, what we need, because we need a lot of couriers on a Friday afternoon and evening. We don't need as many couriers on a Tuesday afternoon. The only way for us to get enough couriers in the peaks is to make it so easy to go online and to work as a courier that like there's going to be a large pool of people that are like, oh, looks like it's raining, it's Friday, I'm going to go do deliveries. It means it's not the best full-time job in the world. It works when it's a minority of couriers that do the work like that. What we've seen, for instance, in Finland as an example, is that when labor markets are not working and there's a massive oversupply of people who want to work as a courier, what starts to happen to our platform is that we have way too many people that try to get online on the platform. And you start to see these things like people trying to get access to a courier account because they don't get access through us, because we're trying to limit the number of couriers on the platform. Or another example would be like having way too many people go online on a Tuesday afternoon. The app literally says, don't go online right now, it's very quiet. And people go online and they're like, why am I not earning? Like I need to get earnings right now. And like that's again something which is a feature of the platform. Now, regulatorily, we could do a lot more, but the issue right now is that we are very limited in our ability what we can do, because we at the same time are basically looking at this kind of freedom and flexibility in the model that we need to enable for the model to exist. And it means that we are also things that we would love to do as a company that we can't. And that's the regulatory question. Now, a lot of countries have solved this. Like in Greece, they did a platform employment legislation already back in 2022. So you can solve these issues. The issue is that most countries, 11 years later, we still haven't done it. So, but the way I think about it is that like it's a part of like going through this kind of an industrial revolution where a lot of things are changing. If I look at our couriers, our average courier satisfaction globally is around 4.6 out of 5. So most people do this because they want to do it. It's a side income occupation for them, and they actually like doing it. But of course, I have 50 million consumers as well. Is every consumer happy about everything we do as a company? No. Like that's the life of a platform company. You can never have 100% of people use the platform in the way that it's designed, completely happy about like the ways that they use it. Long answer, but it was a complicated question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So on to the final large theme of this evening, and my favorite theme, technology and the future of technology. So actually only recently did I finally have an appreciation for the tech of Wolt considering its time. To put into perspective, in 2009, when you were still in aalto-yliopisto, the iPhone just came out. And then a few years later, it became more evident that apps would sort of be the remote control of the physical world. And then when you started Wolt, you mentioned that the first restaurants you onboarded didn't know how to use an iPad, and this was in 2014. So truly a different time. And you've also previously talked about understanding the tech S-curve, that technology is not an if it comes, it's a when it comes. And that's the more interesting question, as you've mentioned. So you've clearly thought about the future, and I want to see what is today. So today what I see, predictive AI is coming out. MIT just earlier this year also even released telepathic communication. And in biotech, there's brain-computer interfaces where it seems like technology is starting to become a form where our brains become the remote controls. So for software companies, what do you think the UI will look like in future?
So I think the first thing is that people get excited about stuff and can dream what is going to happen a lot earlier than like when technology gets there, it's easy enough to use, it's cheap enough to replicate, and there's like a monetizable business model around it. So because of that, people tend to get disappointed. A good example, Europe got very disappointed in the dot-com crash about, the internet and, whether it was a real thing or not. And then all the things that basically happened 20 years later, we could already dream about in the 1990s. So I think in technology, you just see, this S-curve behavior that, there's the first wave of excitement, then there's kind of the valley of death where people are like, it was not really a thing. And then the real long-term thing, it takes a much longer time to get there, and it's much bigger than people realize. If I look at like where tech is going, I think this kind of, have you guys first seen the movie Her? I think that's a good depiction of like what a big user interface is going to be in the future. Conversational AI. Telepathic communication and all these things, like, are we going to have more effective ways to scan the brain with lightweight technology that has efficient enough batteries so that we could have a large language model based on your brain waves, understand what you're thinking? Kind of makes sense. It kind of makes sense. So I can dream it up today. How long is it going to take, to get there? I have no idea. Probably longer than people realize. But like, for me, I'm the type of person that likes to focus on things that are practical in tech right now or soon. Because I've just learned that life is too short to live in the dreamland of like, oh, we're all going to have flying cars and telepathic communication and like, AGI is going to be the god and control the world and whatever. Because I'm like, what's going to happen like right now? What's going to happen like in the next year, in the next 2 years, and so forth. So that's what I tend to be focusing on. If I look at AI as an example, like the thing in AI right now that is interesting is that humans are becoming a lot more efficient. A lot, it's like you as a person can get a lot more done in a condensed time compared to ever before. And I think that's the exciting thing right now. Are all the other things going to come? Yes, in time. But right now, that's the exciting thing. Or algorithms are becoming a little bit smarter. Search is becoming a little bit better. There's like this incremental development that if AI development stopped tomorrow, the world is still going to change more than anyone, I think most people realize. People are dreaming of AGI and like what happens when we have this all-powerful AI, but we don't need to have that for the world to change a lot more than, I think we are ready for, frankly.
So for then the audience who are also then going into technology, what do you think is sort of the next most soon sort of they might start looking into as the next thing that could potentially be the next version of AI, or then maybe even one step further?
Yeah, I think AI is the new internet. So if I think about, I started my studies 2009. I think back then the right thing to do was everything online. Everything internet, everything software, everything mobile, and so forth, in hindsight. And being in the entrepreneurial community, which tends to be excited about the next thing, it was kind of an obvious thing. It was not obvious to most people. And I think right now, the internet of this time is AI in every shape and format. And it's not like there's going to be like only like AI companies and everyone else. I think AI is going to be a thing for every technology company. You're also going to have technology companies founded on the thesis of AI, but like I don't think that's going to be all of it. So I think that's anyway, like if I think about what was one of the critical things I did growing up was that I became very good at using Google when I was a kid. That was one of my unique skill sets. I wouldn't say that it's a bad skill set for a kid today to become very good at using ChatGPT, as an example. It's like basic things like this, and a lot of things open up from there, because ultimately it's about like learning. It's about like, how quickly are you able to find and process information and ultimately apply it. So that's what I would be focused on. Like I'm a big believer that, technology is the place where the world tends to get changed. Big technology companies are very good at replicating. Small technology companies are very good at like innovating or coming up with something new. Both have their pros and cons. But like, if I was young and I didn't know what to do, I would probably try to go to a well-funded meaning maybe they've raised 2 to 20 million in funding, company working in tech on something where they utilize AI and where the founders would be doing their second company. That's what I would do if I didn't know what I wanted to do in life.
Incredible.
So a final quick question before we move on to the Q&A. As we touched upon earlier, you are rare in the sense that you have been successful leader, both in growing a company from 0 to 1, but also leading it when it has thousands of employees. Now you're starting as the CEO of Deliveroo, but that's surely not the only option that you've had. So that makes me curious, on the personal level, what is your motivation to move to that role?
Yeah, I mean, Frank, my role is basically I run everything outside of the US for DoorDash. And for our expansion, we've, since DoorDash acquired Wolt, we opened in 10 new countries. And for us, the acquisition of Deliveroo was a way to do expansion. Expensive expansion, it cost us 3.9 billion, but expansion nevertheless. And the reason I ended up also taking a dual role, as I used to be CEO of Wolt and the head of international for DoorDash, I kind of changed one dual hat to a second dual hat, was that, the most important thing for me, if I think about the next year or the next 2 years, is that Deliveroo is going to succeed as a part of DoorDash. It was easier to make sure that that happens by being immediately responsible and working on the problem versus working through like too many proxies. That's kind of the reason. And then on a personal level, it was like, yeah, this is an interesting thing. Like I've worked on things that I founded with teams that I built for mostly my entire life. This is the first time I'm basically taking over a team of thousands of people I didn't build. That's an intellectually interesting exercise. And I'm the type of person that I used to do events. Then I ended up in the restaurant industry. I've been in the gaming industry. I ended up in grocery. Now I'm increasingly working on stuff in like the broader retail industries. So like I like learning new stuff. That's the thing for me. So I don't mind doing something completely different. That's actually, the thing that keeps it exciting for me. That's why I'm here today. A lot of people ask me, like, Miki, you're an entrepreneur. Like, when are you going to found your next company? And I'm like, I'm 36. I'm not in a hurry anywhere. I have difficulty coming up with something more interesting to work on than the things that I work on right now and the impact that I get to create. And I'm like, yeah, becoming a part of a S&P 500 like executive team in DoorDash was an interesting experience 4 years ago. And then acquiring a UK publicly listed company with 3,500 employees and, basically doing change management and figuring out how we, allow them to succeed as a part of the new setup. That's an interesting problem right now. What that leads to, I don't know.
Thank you, Miki, for answering all of our questions. I have to say, this has been incredibly difficult, as every time we came up with a new question, we always found the answers online. You have so much online presence that I would highly recommend as well everybody to take a look online. So, that being said, it is time for the Q&A section of this talk. Ty and where's Casper? Casper will have mics, so raise your hand, please stand up and ask your question.
Hi, thank you for being here, first of all. Given how much work culture has changed in the past few years, what is the one thing about company values or leading people that you changed your mind about recently, and why?
One realization I've had over the past few years is that one of the purposes of leadership in a scaled company is to make sure you instill intensity into the culture of the company. When you start a company, there's intensity by design. It just comes from the fact that you have a limited amount of money, and if you run out of it, you're going to die. So you need to figure out how to not run out of money, i.e. become profitable and or raise money. There's a lot of intensity in a startup environment by design. When you are a part of a profitable company or you become profitable as a company and you're more mature and competition is no longer like an existential threat every day, but it's more like ocean liners in an ocean. Intensity goes down. It's almost like gravity pulls intensity down in big organizations. And what I've learned and figured out was that one of the purposes of being a leader in an environment like this is to make sure you don't lose that intensity. So I would say that that instilling intensity into culture and into organizations is one thing that I didn't realize until some years ago. That's probably one thing. Is that a different cultural thing? I don't know. And how do you instill intensity? You make sure that things are happening faster than they otherwise would. You make sure that you don't let quality become lower than it otherwise would. You make sure that people are not doing too many things at the same time, but they focus on a smaller subset of things. There's a lot of ways you can instill intensity, but it doesn't happen accidentally. In startups, it happens accidentally. That's why you can very easily take it for granted. So that's definitely one thing, intensity. I would imagine people in our company would say that we are still a very intense place to work.
Miki, I have a following question. So what would be your advice for a startup from Finland that has momentum to grow globally, not to mess things up? So what are the things to do and what are the things not to do?
I think the first thing is that you very rarely succeed more than your wildest ambition. So if you want to build something big, if you want to build something global, if you want to build something ambitious, you need to dream it up first. You need to have what people are going to think are crazy ambitions and crazy goals. Otherwise, you have a very low likelihood of ever getting to that level. This is not a business of do something small in a corner and it accidentally becomes massive. That's the exception, not the rule. It's more we think there's an opportunity to build something massive on a global scale. That's what we want to do, but we start small. But every step we are kind of thinking about where do we want to go with this. That's very important. Wolt was never a company that was built to, be in a country of 5.5 million people. Every step of the way, even when we were 6 founders in a room, everyone being Finnish, we spoke English. Because we knew that we want to build a global company and Finnish is not going to be a global language. It's these kind of small decisions you make from the get-go. So I think this ambition level and having this alignment with your team matters quite a lot. I think the other thing I already mentioned about the quote about the only way to know if you're going fast enough is that things start to feel that they break. You're always going to be on the precipice of breaking when you're scaling. The art of scaling a company is that you're trying to catch up things that come up with scale before they kill you. And there's new things coming all the time and you're not prepared because you're a small team, frankly, trying to survive from one day to the next. And that's fine. That's fine. I think building something that has a product market fit is the heart and soul of every company. Finding some things people need. Product market fit for me is that there's a high enough of a need for something that you do as a company. There's a good saying I heard in the early days of Wolt that I like, which goes, how do you know if you have a product market fit? You don't, but you know if you don't have it. You will know when you have a product market fit. You will feel it. It will feel oh my God, we are just trying to survive serving all these people. If you're asking yourself if you have a product market fit, I tell you, you don't. So product market fit is anyway the heart and soul of everything, but you need the big ambition and it's going to be a shaky way to get there.
Hi Miki, so I just started my kind of academical career here at Aalto just this autumn, and I'm really kind of interested in your early path, your early days that you were 20 years old, you came to Aalto, and then in a few years you were at Slush. You didn't study much, or did you? I don't know, but I was just thinking you just went straight ahead into the startup schemes, doing things. You were at Slush, and then you learned stuff, you failed, you grew also as a person, but then you started Wolt. So what were the skills you learned during that early time that kind of you were able to earn the respect and kind of trust from investors to kind of invest in your early stage first founded company?
Yeah. So everyone has to go through their own journey. So I think one thing you realize in these things that these paths tend to be very different. if I look at my path, first of all, I think going to a university to study is one of the best decisions you can make in your life. Universities are fantastic platforms to learn, to meet people, to figure out what you want to do in life. It is also fantastic to graduate from a university. Don't get me wrong. Like I was always supposed to finish my studies at some point. To this day, I'm still hoping, like still mentally on some level, I'm a student. Hoping to finish I think I got thrown out of the university, so like I can't like technically just waltz in anymore, but I never thought that I'm going to drop out. Like I started as a student in the School of Business. It was called Helsinki-born back then. The reason I went to the School of Business was that I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, and I figured, business school feels like I don't really like to specifically choose anything, which feels like a good thing to do. Like if you go study medicine, you're kind of like you're going to become a doctor. If you don't know if you want to become a doctor, you probably shouldn't go to the School of Medicine. But like the good thing about like a university like Aalto is that there's a lot of directions that you can take. That's good. That's why I went to the School of Business. I got drawn to the product, like the design factory, because of the culture of the people. Like I love this kind of Silicon Valley prototyping, building products, talking about software. This kind of don't worry, be crappy, as Morten said it already back then. Like this, there was something about this kind of builder ethos and builder mindset about like, dreaming up that the world is going to be very different. And there were people like excited about that. That felt very different. That kind of drew me in. And I think in every time and every age, there are these places where there's something interesting happening, where there's people that are enthusiastic and passionate, and good things are going to come from there. I've tended to follow my intuition about that stuff. That's, took me to Aalto, like Entrepreneurship Society. It took me to Silicon Valley. It took me to Supercell. It took me to Slush. It ended up with me founding Wolt. So it's good to follow that kind of good intuition about like enthusiasm and excitement. I think the reason I kind of dropped out was that when I started doing aalto-yliopisto, I was like studying at the same time, and I challenged myself, what am I going to get done if I don't try to do everything all at once, but I concentrate on one thing? I was my GPA, I don't remember my GPA, like 4.5 or something. So I was studying at a high GPA. So it was a really big fucking decision for me to say, I'm not going to study for a year. So I was like, I'm going to hold my feet to the fire. I'm going to feel super uncomfortable not studying for a year. So I'm going to hold myself to a very high bar when it comes to what I need to get done with that time. And that crazy level of ambition and like intensity of doing partially came from this like high opportunity cost of not studying at the same time. And it kind of like, I never meant to not come back to study. It kind of like I ended up like, after I did that 1 year, we did one Slush. Then I happened to run into Ilkka, who was like a 35% company running Supercell. I saw one of their first prototypes for a game that was called Magic. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen on an iPad. It was launched later as Clash of Clans. And I was like, I just want to see what comes out of this. And I basically just happened to be interviewed by 12 people and ended up working at Supercell the following Monday. Then, I was doing Slush as a hobby, and then it became a full-time job, and I did that for a couple of years. I left Supercell because I was like, I need to choose between Slush and Supercell, and I figured Slush wouldn't have continued without me, but Supercell was going to be fine. And then I founded Wolt when I was like, I've been having this thing I've been thinking about for a couple of years, and I can't get rid of it. What's going to happen to all the local services on the edge of the internet? And I had this hypothesis it's going to start with the restaurant. So for me, as I'm trying to explain, it's not like this perfectly designed like path. It was like one thing leading to the next. It was a lot of intuition. It was a lot about people. One thing I've learned is that when there is like enthusiastic and excited people working their asses off on something they believe in, that tends to lead to good places. Even if it doesn't succeed, you're going to learn a lot. You learn a lot by building. You learn a lot by being in places where people are building things, whether they're building companies or building products or other things. And as said, universities are fantastic places. Like as a CEO, I have difficulty using as much AI in my everyday life as I would like because I have so many people doing stuff for me. So I have people that maybe use AI to do the things that they do for me. If you're a student, you're alone. Congratulations, you have all the reasons to use all these AI models every bloody day, like all the bloody time. That's the thing I would be doing. So it's much easier when you're studying to learn new things.
connecting this to how Wolt got its first funding, I believe people seeing you executing and then the connections you made.
No one believed in us. Like everyone thought this was the stupidest thing ever, myself included. I was ashamed to ask anyone to invest. The common denominator of Wolt's first investors were that they were people who asked to invest, because I didn't ask anyone to invest because I was too embarrassed. I got a lot of support from the fact that like I'd gotten to know a lot of people through the things I did in Slush. And one thing I learned in our scene is that we have a strong paid-forward culture, which is another way to say karma. Like, there's a law of karma in the tech scene. You do good things come to you. You help people, people are going to help you. So I'm a big believer in karma, and you need to also like earn the right to get helped by people. People have like so many companies, so many people they could be helping. Why would they spend time on you? You need to earn that. It doesn't come for free. It doesn't come just because you want it. You have to earn it. But yeah, like if I look at Wolt, we also did build a prototype by bootstrapping. So when we raised Wolt's first round of funding, we had been building a prototype for 9 months. We had a fully functional version of Wolt, including the consumer application, the merchant application, the whole shebang. The only thing we hadn't built was like a proper backend system, payments and so forth. So it's not like we raised money on an idea. We had actually built a lot of like stuff by then. And that's a good example of like, one thing I learned about building companies is that you just need to create momentum from nothing. You're constantly trying to push things forward. And it's difficult for everyone. Most companies don't start, I got an idea, and then someone gives you $500,000 and you hire people and you get to build the thing. Most things start that it's difficult to get people, and people are studying and they have a job and they don't have time and they don't believe in the thing and no one wants to invest. And the ones that succeed are the ones that are just persistent about getting forward one small step at a time. And you know what investors love? Investors love persistence. They love seeing that these people didn't give up. They didn't get funding from anyone, but they still figured out a way to build a prototype. They still figured out a way to build a team. They still worked their asses off to take this thing forward. Now imagine if I put some money in this, what can they do? So you need to earn that.
Hi, so I'm a startup founder and you are an inspiration. So thank you so much for sharing the story. And I'm now also reading the book Wolt in Tarina, so the story of Wolt. And I learn a lot and I also resonate a lot as a startup founder. And there's this thing that is written about you. If you don't mind that I read it out loud, and it's in Finnish, so I have to translate it a little bit. So there were Miki's good days when he was all smiling and hopeful. And there were Miki's bad days when he was yelling at other founders that they didn't understand something, that let's close the whole thing and pay back the money to the investors. So
In fact, I said that a couple of times. Not proud.
So I could imagine that there's a lot of emotional roller coaster, and especially now that you've been running the company for over 10 years. So there must have been some framework or something that you have learned along the way to navigate the emotional roller coaster, because balancing between like being authentic, being yourself, being passionate, and then being stable for your team must be a very difficult thing to find out. So if you could share a little bit about that. Thank you.
Yeah, like I said that like enthusiasm is one of the most important things. Enthusiasm is the same thing as passion. What happens when you have 6 passionate people who disagree? So that's the, Juhani, one of my co-founders, once said really well that like, imagine raising a kid with 2 people. Imagine raising a kid with 6 people. That's what like the early days of Wolt were like. But we really cared intensely about what we were doing from the get-go, and still do. So I think passion is a good thing. Like, it's more concerning if you don't have passion. I think there's a quote so one book I really liked was a book called Hard Things About Hard Things. It's written by Ben Horowitz. It's the founder of Andreessen Horowitz. And why I like the book is that there's so many management books about how to be great when everything is amazing. That's most management books out there. But there's very few books of like how not to suck when everything sucks. And that book is one of those books. And in that book, he says one sentence that I think about, like, or especially in those days, thought about a lot, which is the most important job of a CEO is to manage their own psychology. Keep your head together. And it's not easy. It's not easy. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of these, like, things that can kill you. There's things you're excited about, but there's things that you are, really mortally afraid of. And like, the life of an entrepreneur is to somehow scram both of those, into your head and, at the same time have this crazy ambition, but at the same time, be afraid of running out of money and getting killed by competition. And like, to go from one defeat to the next without losing your enthusiasm. Like, these are not easy journeys to go through. And I think the important thing is that, you don't do it alone. It's a team sport. One thing I learned in Slush was that, by being in it together with other people, sharing openly, like everyone in my team always knew everything that I knew, everything that I was worried about, everything that I was excited about and so forth. It meant that I was never alone. It's like having, like, when you have 5 co-founders and you talk about everything, it's like having five like therapists for everyone. It makes it a lot more bearable. And then, like, just actively recognizing that, yeah, it's difficult. Yeah, it's stressful. Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty. Like, yeah, we might get killed. We might not make the next fundraise. And then, accepting that and working backwards from that, how do we make that not be the case? There's a samurai saying I like related to this, which goes, always keep death in mind. As a startup entrepreneur, always keep death in mind. And I don't talk about your, like, literal death as an entrepreneur. I talk about your death as a company, running out of money, effectively, before you become profitable or raise more money. And when you always keep that in mind, and you're always trying to figure out, like, how do you cheat death? How do you make sure that's not going to happen? You're more likely to succeed. So that's one thing that, like, I learned along those years. But yeah, the reason we participated in the writing of the book, we didn't write it, but like why we kind of like wanted to help the writers succeed with that, gave them a lot of access. I spent a lot of hours interviewing with them as well. Was that we kind of felt like we owed it to ourselves and others to share that, like, these are not easy journeys, and not all those struggle succeed. But all those who succeed struggled. And that's certainly the case for us as well.
And the last question.
So you quoted that if the Formula driver is comfortable with its driving, he is not driving fast enough. Yet you said that the mistakes came when you became too egotistical. How do you dream big enough without becoming too egotistical? / where do you draw the line between dreams and ego?
30-second
answer, please.
It's a good question. The F1 driver is Mario Andretti. I just don't remember how to spell this last name. That's why I didn't say it. But it's a good question. Someone once said that you should keep your head in the clouds but your feet on the ground. That's I think a good visual way to think about it. Like there was a coach in the early days of aalto-yliopisto who said, you need to be like a humble, hungry hunter. Humble means that you are going, you're not making too big of a thing of yourself, and you're learning and you're kind of optimizing to go from one thing to the next, and you're curious, but at the same time you're hungry. Hungry means you want to go somewhere. You can be ambitious. You can be like you can want to go to places, but you should never become arrogant. And this is one of those balances I was talking about. Like, balance is an art, and the reality is that. It's very easy to be too humble. It's very easy to be too arrogant. It's very difficult to be the right amount of each. So I don't know if there's a general rule there. One thing I've learned is that it's good to be ambitious for a group of people than for yourself. So I always try to remove myself as an individual. In our company we have a saying: company first, team second, individual last. Because if our company succeeds, it's going to help your team succeed. If your team succeeds, it's going to help you succeed. If you start with yourself succeeding and you think about what's going to be the best for you, you're not going to help the team succeed to the best of your capability. You're not going to help the company succeed to the best of your capability. So I think one thing about ambition is that it's a lot better to have collective ambition than individualistic ambition. One thing you will very rarely hear me talk about if you come to Wolt and you observe our company is that we say very little I. We talk a lot about we, because we are building this thing, not me. And that's a part of it.
And thank you everyone for your questions and sharing this moment with us. If you didn't get your answers, Tommy and I can recommend the book as well as the videos online. And most of all, thank you, Miki, for sharing this precious time and your wisdom with us, inspiring future founders. See you again in the December Founder Talk.
So